From 1880 to 1920, 27 million immigrants came to America from other countries, mostly from Europe. America did not react well to this new synthesis of culture. Rather, they wanted to coerce all these cultures into one dominant Anglo-Saxon culture, an idea known as Americanism. Under this idea became what is known as the melting pot theory, the practice of taking all minorities in America and melting them down in the huge pot of America into one single culture. The majority of Anglo-Saxon Americans supported this idea. One such American was Theodore Roosevelt, who in his 1912 election speech said, "We have room for but one language here. We intend to see that the Crucible turns our people out as Americans, and not as dwellers in a polyglot boarding house." This idea carried well in America, for the American people were still set on carrying out their ideals of white supremacist ideology as they always had. And so came immigration reform, in the form of the Johnson-Reed Act, which limited annual U.S. immigration to 2% of the numbers of each nationality as recorded in the 1890 census. As you can see in the decades after 1920, the number of immigrants greatly decreased. So how is America, as a nation so diverse, going to deal with this? In response to America's coercive attempts at suppressing minority cultures in favor of the dominant white Anglo-Saxon culture, pluralism arose as a way to fight for the cultural and individual rights of all Americans. The first person to publicly pose a counterargument to Americanism was a German Jewish intellectual named Horace Kellan. In an article titled "Democracy versus the Melting Pot," he argued that America had become a democracy of nationalities, cooperating voluntarily and autonomously in an enterprise of self-reliance and utilizing a common language, English, meaning that even in America, each of these nationalities could uphold a separate individual identity. He used the 1910 census to prove that 51% of North Atlantic state people and 41% of Western state people were either foreign-born or had at least one foreign-born parent. He further combated Americanism with his symphonies of civilization model. Picture your violin, your cello, your piano, your flute. Now picture them all playing together in harmony. This was his model, all of the nationalities in America working together in harmony to further American culture. The next cultural pluralist who expanded on Kellan's ideas was Randolph Bourne. Though a native-born American, he identified with those marginalized in society because he was born with a facial deformity. In one of his great essays, he argued that there were only two ideas of American nationalism, the melting pot theory or the cooperation of cultures, which he called transnationalism. He also made the progressive claim that America insisted that aliens be forcibly assimilated to the Anglo-Saxon tradition they labeled Americanism in order to impose its own culture upon the minority people. Due to what Bourne observed, he publicly argued that there were distinct cultures in America and that America should do more to allow these distinct cultures to prosper. To Bourne, this was preferable to tasteless, colorless conformity. These pluralists saw in America booming, thriving cultures that could contribute to America. One great example of this was in Harlem, where at the time many intellectuals were also arguing that their culture should have a better cultural identity, mainly through art. And as America kept growing and progressing, more ideas like these began spreading, and more pluralists began springing up to fight the ideas of Americanization in the melting pot, and fight for equal equality for all. These cultural pluralists in the 1920s and 30s were some of the first fighters in the long line leading up to the Civil Rights Act that came about decades later.